Hello and welcome to this session entitled Exploiting a Data Fabric to Drive Data Literacy and Data Democratization, where I hope to explain these concepts, why they're important, and how a modern data fabric architecture can help deliver these capabilities. My name is Darren Brunt and I'll be your host for this session today. Every organization today is looking to realize the full potential of their data, for everything from basic analytics to predictive insights and monetization. There are some key challenges to the nirvana of a truly data-driven organization, however, in the form of data literacy, the ability to locate, understand, curate, and communicate data as information, and data democratization, the ability to industrialize governed access to data for all data workers within an enterprise. These challenges typically require cultural and process change enabled by suitable technologies. Here at Talend, we believe that a data fabric which balances collaboration, ease of use, and governance to deliver healthy, trusted data as a team sport is a key enabler for driving data literacy and data democratization adoption. In this session, we aim to show you how core components of our data fabric can help deliver on this promise. Firstly, however, let's determine exactly what a data fabric is and why you might consider one to help drive data literacy and data democratization. The data journey in today's organizations has become more complex and more relevant than ever before, from definition to ingestion through to consumption and ultimately retirement of data assets. The life cycle of data has become far more complex and part of a more distributed yet integrated life cycle. Couple that complexity with the demand for agility, and that's why the concept of a data fabric is becoming increasingly popular as a support framework for the entire data lifecycle. We're not talking about data ingestion or data movement or data quality as discrete disciplines here, but something that encompasses all of these foundational elements and much more to simplify the end-to-end management of data through its journey. But data fabric is an overloaded term with many interpretations. For example, Gartner defines a data fabric as a design concept that serves as an integrated layer or fabric of data and connecting processes which addresses the life cycle of data, the design, deployment, and operationalization of data, the reuse of data, the availability of data across all environments, including hybrid and multi-cloud, the intelligence in data, the ease of discovery, literacy, relationships, and lineage of that data itself, and finally monitoring, the measurable aspects of data which can be continuously assessed or monitored. If we translate Gartner's data fabric definition into a set of capabilities to support the data lifecycle, then we can identify the following disciplines: data modeling, data management, data discovery or cataloging, data governance, data measurement or scoring, as well as data access and sharing. The Talend Data Fabric is designed to provide a modern, modular architecture to address such capabilities in an easy-to-use, persona-aligned collaboration platform designed to help accelerate data solution deployments. Let's put a little bit more detail into the key reasons why organizations are choosing a data fabric approach to tackle today's data challenges. First up, the complexity of the data lifecycle. The increased scope of data within an organization, the variety and veracity of data that an organization needs to consume and deal with is also increasing. Various integration styles exist, from batch to real-time to event-driven to API or event-driven architectures. The compute requirements of data in the life cycle also needs to be gauged. Where's the most appropriate place to run this compute? Is it flexible? Does it need to be flexible? Is it intensive? Is it lightweight? We also have multiple disciplines and multiple personas now engaging in the data lifecycle as we federate the concept of integration or ownership of data and accountability of data within an organization, which obviously drives additional requirements around governance and control, during that end-to-end process, which was typically, the remit of IT, but now a federated or team sport activity. And finally, if we are creating, reusable assets of information, then the sharing or the democratization of those constructed assets is equally as important as the ability to create them. Secondly, enabling agility. The Complexity of data and the timeliness that data needs to be delivered and the demands of an organization demand that data platforms need to be agile to cope with business demand. That means that we need seamless collaboration between the parties that engage with data. We need to be looking at metadata-driven frameworks that enable patterns of integration to be developed that are reusable for similar ways in which data is managed or ingested, for example, so that we don't have to reinvent the wheel every time. We're looking for high interoperability so that the ease of integration and interoperability between applications, data resources, or other resources can be as simple as possible. We're also looking to drive automation, the way in which we can enable agility, not just in the way in which new data flows and processes and pipelines are built, but also maintained through their life cycle. So the ability to automate ingestion, the ability to automate test and deployment, and the way in which we can automate the way in which we validate data is also important to that agility piece. And finally, to help drive agility in the platform, we need to embed some intelligence or literacy into the platform to enable literacy. The idea here is that we provide the insights and the ideas behind the data that can help drive up an understanding of what the data represents, and therefore the literacy or understanding of what that data represents that obviously aids people's decisions around whether that's a good data set to use or not. And finally, reducing the risk is a key aspect of why considering a data fabric. A fabric provides a holistic approach to dealing with a complex data journey in today's organizations, but also in a modularized way using industry-leading concepts. So most data fabrics consist of a number of modules which plug together to provide these capabilities. And it also provides for longevity in decision-making. If the ability to join your data platform requirements together as part of a holistic and strategic adoption means that you can ultimately provide better longevity in the solution. And it also helps address this build versus buy concept. Do I look at a best of breed approach for all of the different disciplines which have been identified as a data fabric, or do I go for an integrated data fabric that drives this interoperability and agility through the integration of its various components? So to sum things up, a data fabric helps address the complexity in today's data lifecycle through an integrated approach which supports a culture of data inspection for driving data literacy, whilst providing a well-governed framework for data democratization. It's on this platform of well-understood and well-governed data that a data fabric provides that I can introduce you to Talend's vision of the concept of data health for the enterprise. Similar to a health system maintaining our personal health, data health is Talend's vision for a holistic system of preventative measures, effective treatments, and most importantly, a supportive culture to actively manage the well-being of corporate information. To stay healthy, we must develop good habits like exercising regularly, eating a balanced diet, and scheduling regular checkups to ensure our bodies are working the way we expect them to work. Similarly, we need to do the same with our data. It's important that businesses develop good data management habits, define simple and repeatable processes for integration and stewardship, establish bulletproof data access and security practices, and maintain a pulse on the health of the data by being mindful of data quality throughout its life cycle, even profiling and understanding data before it even enters corporate systems. To maintain good health, we visit doctors regularly to evaluate our health in a deeper, more rigorous way. This ensures we can catch unforeseen health problems whilst also identifying potential issues and root causes and getting direction on the best path forward. In a world where data sources and formats advance at a pace only exceeded by the business demands for the data within, data professionals need to be supported by tools that automatically scan and resolve issues. They also need the ability to evaluate data reliability and risk in a deeper, more rigorous way and transform the data they need in a fast, scalable manner. On a personal basis, a supportive health culture ensures that we understand our medical information. We know where to get it, we know who to ask for help, and that our medical providers talk to each other securely as we provide consent. Businesses also need the ability to share data with customers and partners and collaborate with and leverage the work of other data professionals in the right format, context, and in the apps they want to use. They also need to maintain the trust of all customers by ensuring all personal identifiable information is protected. Vitally, we believe the system also needs to include monitoring and reporting tools for helping us create a common way within the organization for data providers and consumers to understand the health of a data set, to know at a glance if they can trust the data, informing of action if necessary. At the same time, these tools should afford organization-wide visibility into the reliability, risk, and return of data in a quantifiable way. We've encapsulated this concept within the Talend Trust Score. Within Talend, datasets are automatically profiled with a trust score automatically computed based on their underlying data quality dimensions, such as completeness, semantic consistency, and so on. The trust score is instrumental to determining the health of a dataset at any particular moment during its data lifecycle. In the future, the aim is for data health solutions to ultimately help create a universal set of metrics to evaluate the health of corporate data and establish it as an essential indicator of the overall strength of a business. Now let's take a look at how these various elements and concepts we've introduced can be realized in practice by way of a demonstration. Let me introduce you to the business challenge. Invalid customer or contact data in our CRM platform. Seems like a pretty simple challenge to solve, right? But the impact can be quite considerable. The quality or the lack of quality in contact or customer information in our CRM system means that it's difficult for us to be impactful with customer marketing and profiling capabilities. If we can't do analytics and do analytics reliably, then how can we create the necessary insights and actionable outcomes that we want? In addition, this particular organization urgently needs to create a 360-degree view of their customer to help drive upsell and cross-sell across digital channels, which are becoming more and more prevalent as the organization pivots to digital channels because of the changing environment and market that we now live in. Let me introduce you to the two key personas that we're going to look to in this demonstration. First up, we have the data owner, who is a marketing ops person. In marketing operations, her objective is to improve the effectiveness of marketing campaigns, to turn the data that they capture on individuals into revenue, and obviously at the same time to be mindful of regulatory obligations such as GDPR or PII, and then hence protect sensitive data. Supporting the data owner is the data engineer, somebody typically working in IT who wants to help support the business requirements but has limited capacity and limited capabilities. But they want to help in connecting and cleansing that data. They want to operationalize the data flows to help the business move forwards. But with all organizations, there are these pains that need to be overcome to enable the objectives. The pains of not meeting the objectives means that the marketing campaigns have low impact. We have weak data monetization, and perhaps we may get a breach if governance and regimes are not in place to manage exposed data. From a data engineering point of view, if you ask me to operationalize data flows, then if you give me bad data, then we're going to produce bad data outcomes. I also have limited capacity and time, and ultimately I'd love to be able to delegate aspects of the overall data pipeline to subject matter experts who can help with cleansing and protection of the data itself. So let's look at a use case or a sample scenario here where these two personas can interoperate and drive resolution using some of these new concepts of a data fabric that we've just been talking about. So our demo flow takes three phases essentially. First up, we capture the data intelligence in the data that we're looking to use. We understand that we have some issues with the contact information in our CRM system. In this case, it's Salesforce, but it doesn't necessarily need to be Salesforce. It can be any system that we can ingest data from. The second phase is really to boost that data intelligence by using subject matter expertise to operationalize that intelligence and ultimately share that intelligence with other people. So let's just take a look at the data flow here. When we're capturing data intelligence, data owners or subject matter experts who are familiar with the data need the ability to introspect or inspect that data. They need the ability also to provide their expertise in terms of augmenting, enriching, or fixing that data to a degree possible from their control or their understanding. And within our demonstration, we're going to look at two aspects of Talend Data Fabric called data inventory, where we're able to introspect the data and understand metrics and capabilities of the data itself, and also data preparation, which is a self-service data blending, data wrangling tool for business users or data owners to self-prepare their data, but in a governed way. When it comes to boosting that data intelligence, what we're going to do is encapsulate or leverage that data intelligence that the marketing ops person has provided by way of the preparation, and industrialize or operationalize that within a data pipeline. So capturing the intelligence that the data owner, or in this case marketing operations, has provided as part of an operational pipeline to drive the improvements of that CRM data. But as all things, there may still be anomalies or issues with that data that may need further subject matter expertise to help remediate and guide the resolution of delinquent or incorrect or inaccurate data. And that's where we look to empower the data intelligence of subject matter experts like data stewards, people with subject matter expertise that may be able to help with resolving delinquent data issues within our pipeline. And ultimately, engaging them in a trusted and governed way enables us to, drive this concept of literacy and understanding of data from a data owner perspective, and democratization by engaging, others in the organization in this team sport of data management to ultimately drive trusted CRM contacts in a new outcome or output. Now, of course, that could be a round trip, closed loop concept, so that we push the data back into Salesforce, or in this case, we're going to push the cleansed CRM contacts into a new repository that we can use for analytics. Now, as we mentioned before, Talend Data Fabric has this concept of a trust score, a measurable and quantifiable measure of the trustworthiness of data according to a number of different dimensions of assessment. Now, what we're going to do in this demonstration is look at this trust score during the duration of the data and look at how we can use the intelligence that the platform offers to help drive remediation and improvement in that data to improve the trust score. So let's switch now to the demonstration itself, and we're going to look at these three different personas as part of the demonstration. The marketing ops representative, who's the data owner, the data engineer, who operationalizes the data pipelines, and also the data stewards, who engage with that data for remediation and repair. So let's log into the Talend platform to start this demonstration. As I log into the platform, I'm going to be presented with a number of different apps or modules within the platform that I can engage with. And my persona or role determines what I can see. As a data ops user, as a marketing ops user, the data owner, I actually want to explore my data. I want to add it to what we call the data inventory, so I can start my introspection of the data set and start understanding some of the challenges with that data itself. So I'm going to head to the data inventory. And the data inventory is managing all of the resources that the Talend platform is engaging with, either as sources or targets or reference data or whatever, as part of the data pipelines or management processes within the fabric itself. The inventory has a series of connections associated with it under management that connect to a wide variety of target platforms and resources. As we can see here, whether they be databases, data warehouses, cloud storage, REST APIs, HDFS platforms, you name it, a wide variety of platforms and resources which are under management from a connection point of view. And on those connections, we manage data sets, things related to the connection. And once we have a data set under management, we start this process of assessing the trust score. And you start to see some of the metrics listed here, the trust score of various data sets, as well as some high-level indications of compliance of those data sets with the semantic analysis which is running on it. But let's just start off with our data set. I have my CRM data here. It happens to be a CSV export. It doesn't really matter. We could connect directly to Salesforce, but in the interest of time, I'm simply uploading my CRM CSV file here, and automatically the system is assessing the trust score for me. So at this point, we're adding our CRM contact information, our raw CRM information to the inventory. The system is automatically profiling that data to try and determine the initial trust score of this data and give me some ideas of where issues might lie in that data itself. So here you can see we've computed a trust score of 2.55 for the initial data set, and this value is out of 5. So 2.55 out of 5, it seems that we're not too bad, but not too good in terms of the overall trustworthiness of this data. And this little chart here shows us the different dimensions by which the trust score is being assessed. Everything from the validity of the data, so generally the data is valid, but we have 19% of the data that's invalid. The popularity of the data, well, it's just a data set that's been just added, so it's hardly popular in the platform. From a completeness point of view, it looks like the data generally is well populated, if not accurate. So again, it's not an issue perhaps that we have in the data of completeness, but accuracy of the data. And also other dimensions here are scoring low around how discoverable is this data asset right now, and where it's used in the platform, clearly not used anywhere right now. At the same time, the profile is giving us a high-level view of some of the key data quality metrics. So according to the semantic profiling that's been applied to the data, which I'll show you in a second, the system is determining that just over 7% of the data is invalid, depending on how it should be represented within the data set. It's also indicating that just shy of 13% of the data is empty. So we do have, generally a challenge with empty values in the data, but overall 80% of the data is valid. At the same time, I can tag and augment this data set with additional attributes, custom attributes, and also using social curation to vote on this data. But what is the actual data? So let's just take a peek into the data set itself. Here I can see that the data comprises of an ID for the consumer or the contact, some kind of timestamp, some addressing information, phone numbers, email addresses, as well as the industry and acquisition channel that particular contact has come through. And these are particularly important from a GDPR perspective for us to understand the acquisition channel to ensure that we can contact or share information from these particular contacts. What you can also see is the system has semantically determined what the data is. So there's no schema here determining what this data represents. We can see here that the address attribute has been identified as an address line, perhaps. And if that is the case, then generally 89% of this data looks like a valid address line, but we have around 11% of the data that is actually empty. Similarly, this column here has been identified as generally looking at US cities, but if we check the semantic profiling, we can see that we're kind of 72% sure they might be US cities or international cities, and less sure that they might be something else. So every time the data is profiled, we semantically try and determine with the most probability what we think the data is. Similarly here for international phone numbers, here we can see that we've got a lot of invalid values if these are indeed international phone numbers. Emails generally are badly populated with 73% empty, so clearly a lot of work to do there, specifically if this is a marketing campaign. And similarly, we have some issues with job sector and acquisition channels. So as a data owner, I'm getting a first view of what the data set is, and more importantly, where issues might be with the data, both in terms of column level headings, in terms of the compliance with semantic types, and individual row-based indicators with these red lines here indicating where we have non-compliant values associated with the semantic profiling. So what I'm going to do here as the data owner is say, I want to build a preparation. I actually want to add a preparation to my CRM data set so I can start the process of driving some of this improvement. So the view in the data inventory there is static. I can't really do anything with the data. Let me just log back in here, sorry. But within the data preparation, I'm able to then actually, indicate what my intention is to drive improvement on this data itself. So here's the preparation that was just created. Let me open that. And I see a similar view here to the original data in the data inventory. The difference here is on the right-hand side, I now have a whole series of functions which I can apply to that data that simplify the way in which I engage with the data and drive change that data from my own insights and introspection. Within here also we can, for every column, look at some aspects of the column. So for instance, the ID here, down the bottom right-hand side, there are some basic analytics. We can see that if I look at the values, we've got 100 distinct values in the data indicating that each ID is unique, which is great. If I look at the pattern, each ID looks like it's a similar format. They're all 7 characters in length. And if I did something similar like at the created date, we can also look at how those patterns are managed here. So we can see that the created date is all following a similar digit pattern. Okay, so every single one of these columns is providing some degree of understanding around what this represents from a value and a spread perspective. So here, for example, in terms of the country, I can see the distribution of where these contacts currently sit. Mostly it looks like around the US as opposed to European distribution, for example. So let's start out with looking at this big challenge here with what look like international phone numbers. Here we can see if I just look at the patterns here, all sorts of different ways of representation. We've got digits and numbers with dashes and brackets, all sorts of different ways of representing that. So let's see if from a functional perspective, we can do something about it. The system makes some suggestions about what I might want to do, clear the cells or delete them. Actually, I want to see if I can do something with actually formatting this phone number. So in terms of type down, there's a function here called format phone number. And what I want to do here is actually format the phone number in conjunction with another column, which is the country. So if we look here, I'm using another column, a country column, and I want to format from an international perspective. If we know the country, then we should be able to format the number from a full international perspective. If I hover over the submit button here, what you'll see in green are the cells changing, indicating where the data would change as a result of applying this function. So what we can see is a good tidy up in terms of adding the country code, dropping leading zeros and things, and where possible, formatting the number where it makes sense to do so. Now, if I hit submit here, I'm not actually modifying the underlying data in the data inventory or indeed my underlying file. What I'm doing here is recording my intentions of what I would do to this data to help drive improvement. And it's those series of steps that form a recipe which we'll can industrialize via our data engineer a little later on. Let's have a look at our name here, because if we are going to contact these individuals, it's important that we understand who they are and whether we're representing them correctly. And again, we can see some capitalization in names here, and it might be that easing our way in representation, we might want to just change all these names firstly to something that we call title case. The idea here is that we just have capitalized first and last names. Okay, so now that we've standardized the way we represent them, we now might want to start extracting aspects of the name to determine what we know about these individuals. So here I'm going to look at just the title, the first name, the last name, and the confidence that we've been able to extract those details. So here I'm actually creating a few new columns in the data set, but what I am managing to do here is separate out the forename and the surname and any title that we find. So I can now format this namespace myself should I want to. Okay, next up, let's take a look at some of the challenges here with things like job industry. So first things again here, perhaps want to just make sure that all of these industries are changed to title case to make sure that we're dealing with everything with the right capitalizations. Okay, and what we want to do here is there's still some anomalies in this data. We can see here that 22% of this data, which we believe to be some sort of sector. So again, the semantic determination. Let's take a look. The column is a sector. It believes there's a semantic type called sector, which we understand, which is 78% sure, but 36% sure it could be some form of industry group. So we have a semantic engine behind the scenes here, which is assessing how to interpret what the data represents. And this is part of the whole literacy aspect of the data inspection, helping people understand what the data is, even if it's not declarative by schema or other mechanism. So at this point, we're 78% sure that this is some sort of job industry or sector. But if that's true, then we have some anomalies in here. So perhaps what we might do here is just find and group similar related text in this particular column. So here, effectively, we're doing some fuzzy matching across what the data represents and the preferred outcomes according to the semantic type which we want to align them to. So here we can see we've found things like energy and energy spelled incorrectly that we want to map to a single value energy. We've got some misspelling of financials in here as well. Materials, utilities is a particularly poor one, and so on and so forth. So what we're doing here is basically grouping and matching related data according to a built-in fuzzy matching algorithm and aligning it with the semantic type which we think is the most appropriate outcome here. If I hit submit on this, then hopefully we'll get much better alignment with our job industry. So we had 22% invalid before, and now we're down to just 8% invalid. And again, I could drive some further introspection of what they represent. When it comes to PII, for example, you might not want to propagate the birth date, in its current format. We might want to keep it there to understand that we have a birth date, but we might want to hash it, for example, to protect it from a privacy point of view. So again, I might apply a hashing algorithm to that to hash the birth date. Right. From an acquisition point of view, as I mentioned before, it's really important that we understand how this particular contact was acquired. So again, let me just title case everything here to make sure that we're dealing with everything in absolute capitals where appropriate. But here we need to make sure that we're aligning with how we understand these people have been acquired, because if we don't understand, we might not be able to share their details with others. So what we want to do here is fill empty cells with text. We actually want to say, if the acquisition channel is empty, we actually want to mark it as other, so that we want to make sure that we understand that it's some other acquisition channel and not something that we don't know. And similarly, if we just look down the chart here of the distribution of our acquisition channel, we can see here there's something called NA. And NA is not applicable, obviously, but what we want to do here is actually say from an NA perspective, we want to represent that as other as well. So what we want to do here is actually overwrite this cell with the word other and apply all of that to other cells that have the same NA value. So now my filter's cleared. And if I go back to my acquisition channel now, I can see that we now have nearly full compliance with the acquisition channel. We still have some invalid values. Now, as a data owner, marketing ops, I'm now happy that I've done as much as I can to help cleanse and prepare that data. So now what I'm going to do is advertise that I've done this work and publish this preparation so somebody in IT from a data engineering perspective can operationalize it. So let me just move this preparation into this published folder, notifying and indicating to somebody in data engineering that I have some intention of what I want to apply to my CRM data. So let's leave the persona of the the marketing ops person right now and move into the persona of the data engineer. Now, the data engineer also has access to the data inventory. And here, again, we can see our CRM data listed at the top of our data inventory as the most recently added resource. And from here, I can actually build my own pipeline to consume that CRM data and apply the preparation to it. So let me introduce you to Pipeline Designer. Pipeline Designer is the data engineering persona in the platform that enables me to quickly and easily build pipelines that enable me to operationalize data flows. So what I'm going to do here is add a pipeline. I'm going to use my CRM source that I just created 14 minutes ago here as my source. And the difference here with Pipeline Designer is that we have constant introspection of the data, an online preview that's showing me at all times exactly what the data represents. So what you can see there is exactly what the data represents in our raw CRM data as it stands today. So we can see phone numbers are not internationalized. We've got lots of acquisition channels that are empty, etc. And now what I want to do as the engineer that's been indicated or published the preparation, I want to actually operationalize that preparation from our marketing ops user. I can simply, that preparation that they created is encapsulated as that series of steps that were being captured on the left-hand side. I can now select that preparation. Let's go and find it. And operationalize it as part of my pipeline. So hopefully when I save this, we should start seeing on the output here what the impact of that preparation would be. So here we can see, for example, we now have international phone numbers listed there. We also at the back end here have other and all of our acquisition channels populated. So we can see the effect of the preparation that has been conducted by the business user, but now being applied operationally by the data engineer. Okay, so next up, we have something here called created at. I actually want to, from a data engineering point of view, want to deal with that as a better timestamp. So what I'm going to do here is look for a processor that deals with dates. I just literally drag and drop or drop in processes here that enable me to drive this pipeline end to end until I decide where I want to push this data. So here, what I want to do is convert a timestamp to a date. It is the created at field that you can see there. And I want to not create a new column, but actually just reformat that column as an ISO 8601 date and time. If I save that, what I should see on the output in a second is now the preview of what our new data set looked like. So the idea here with Pipeline Designer is very simple to drag or add processes to the pipeline, but always be available to introspect what the data looks like before actually running the pipeline. So it's pretty much understanding the intention before you actually run it. But also this is an analytics project. So what I want to do here is actually select a subset of the fields that would go into the analytical output, from our cleansed CRM. So what I'm going to do here is select certain fields from here. So again, let's just take a look at the fields that might need to be created here. So I want my ID. We want to do some analytics on country and phone numbers and emails and full names, and probably look at them by job industry and acquisition channel. So just selecting a subset of the attributes for our output that we want to create our analytics view of this data for. And nearly there. Now I want to make sure that we're capturing all of the correct records or the most populated records in our target. So let me just start a filtering process here. And what I want to do, or what I can do here, is add rules like, for example, if the country length is, I don't know, greater than 0, follow this route. If the email address is populated, for example. And again, all sorts of different functions here you can apply, including custom functions like matching functions, etc. So I'm just going to use some simple ones here where the email length is greater than 0, and so on and so forth. So I'm just making sure that this filtered output produces populated data that we can now add to our destination. Adding to the destination, I want to perhaps create a new data set here. I want to use on my local connection. So again, the file system that I have under my own management. So I want to put it into Parquet format, for example, but I have many choices: Avro, Excel, CSV. I want to use Parquet. The data set name might be no cleansed contacts. And as that new data set is added to the inventory and created as a new outcome, not yet until we run the pipeline, I now can also take the alternative output from this filter, and that is very much about trapping those records that don't have a country or don't have an email address associated with them. And here I have the ability to add a destination, which is not a data resource or an application resource, but actually a stewardship campaign. And what I'm going to do here is actually reuse an existing campaign called Contacts Resolution, which enables me to push those records that don't meet the filter criteria, i.e. they don't have a country or an email address associated with them, and push them out to a stewardship campaign for guided remediation from subject matter experts. The last thing I need to do here, as we mentioned before, is about deciding where to run this workload. And here you can see a whole bunch of different target execution environments that we could run this on, whether it's Databricks on Azure or standard cloud engine within Talend itself, or indeed local work engines that individuals are managing. Here I'm just going to select our standard cloud engine, and now my pipeline is ready to run. And what should happen here is we take our raw CRM information, we apply our business users preparation, our marketing ops users preparation, and finally we drive stewardship campaign to resolve, and wherever we have cleanse contacts, we create a new outcome here called cleanse contacts. So what I'm going to do is actually, as in good tradition, is actually run a version of this which I've created already, and here it is, exactly the same concept. And if I run this pipeline live, what you'll see is that CRM data being consumed. We're going to apply that preparation that the marketing ops user created, and apply all of the filters and all the conversions that we mentioned before, but also see what's going out to the contracts resolution campaign for stewardship interaction, as well as the contacts cleansed outcome that we want to generate our clean contacts into. That process is now run. So let me yet again change personas here. I now want to change persona into a data steward, somebody who would have been notified that perhaps new tasks are waiting for me on a queue that I need to remediate and engage with. So again, another component within the Fabric platform is something we call data stewardship. And data stewardship provides a series of tasks to data stewards who are nominated or targeted by specific campaigns. Now, me as a data steward here, I have a number of different campaigns which I can engage with, but what I can see here is there are 78 unassigned tasks on a campaign called Contacts Resolution, the campaign that we just pushed those particular delinquent contacts out to. There's nothing yet on my queue, so let's have a look at the unassigned queue. Again, a workflow mechanism that enables me to pick up and use from unassigned queues, or to distribute workloads across nominated individuals. In this particular case, all the work is unassigned. What I might do is pick up the first 6 or 7 of these tasks, allocate them to me, so I can now start working on what these tasks represent. So let's go back to my assigned queue. Now, what we can see here are individual tasks which have been raised up by our processing pipeline to flag the fact, for instance, we don't have an email address, or we don't have a country, or whatever it might be in the data. And if either of those are true, or no international phone numbers, as the case may be, then we want to engage a steward. We want to engage a subject matter expert who can help remediate and determine how we can fix this particular attribute or this particular contact. So let's just take an example here of this, this example, Dr. George Hartley. What we can see here is that he has a valid email address, if I just come along here, but doesn't have a country ISO code. Okay, so that's missing. If I look at the international phone number, that actually looks like perhaps a UK phone number. So we might want to make some decisions here about how we represent the ISO code. So is there something in the semantic engine that we know as UK for the country ISO 2 code? Yes. So let's select that. That means that my little red bar disappears, indicating that I've fixed compliance with that semantic type. It might be that because this hasn't been internationalized as part of the preparation, I might want to manually go and add some information to this phone number. It might be that I know that the UK is +44 and we drop the leading 0, and I can manually change information in this. And finally, we can see here in the sector, there's a challenge here with what looks like perhaps a spelling mistake. It possibly could be industrials as opposed to industrials. So let's just take a look in the semantic type called sector, which this has been identified with, to see if there's something similar. And yes, in the drop-down list, we can see something called industrials. So selecting that means suddenly I've removed all of the red indicators on this row, suggesting that the record is now semantically compliant and therefore fixed and potentially available for reprocessing. At any time in data stewardship, we can just check all of the things that have changed, and all of this is audited. So essentially, we can unravel work that a steward has done, but also more importantly, audit the work that a steward has done on every single task or activity. So here you can see I picked it off the empty queue and gave it to myself. I changed the country ISO code to UK. I modified the phone number and changed the sector from industrials to industrials. And all that information is being recorded so that we understand what the steward did to this data from a governance, control, and audit perspective. And once all of that's done, I can attempt to lock this row. And I've just locked that. That's changed green, indicating that from a semantic compliance and from a rules checking perspective, this now looks like a valid contact. And if I hit validate here, the system will determine whether that's a valid contact and remove it from my queue tasks or task of queues, queue task, sorry, to indicate that it's now ready for processing. So from a steward, I would just continue working through all of these. In these cases where there's no email address, I might actually go call the actual consumer and get their email address manually, or some other mechanism, or maybe even push this out to an external calling agency to go get the missing contact information, or perhaps look at an external system, reference system, that might be able to get this information for all these different people by using matching capabilities in the platform as well. So finally, let's go back to our data engineering persona and back into Pipeline Designer so that I can actually start driving the processing of those remediated tasks. And again, rather than build another pipeline here, let me just show you something very simple. All we're doing here in Pipeline Designer is now consuming from the contacts resolution campaign and looking at all of the resolved tasks that are in there. So let's just see here, we're looking for only for resolved tasks. We're going to filter down what we need to select from those tasks, and then ultimately add them to our contacts cleansed outcome. And if I run this process, again, this process would run with increasing frequency, maybe once a minute or once every half hour or whatever it might be, to help mop up all of the stewardship activities. What hopefully we should see is an additional record being processed through the platform from the resolved task that I actually completed. And there it goes, that one record for our doctor has now been processed and added to the contacts cleansed data set. Back in data inventory now, let's go look at context cleanse. Let's go and take a look at what that data represents and looking at whether we now have a better set of data than the original CRM data that we started out with. So context cleansed is here. I think anyone who can remember, we started out with a CRM data set of 2.55 trust score. Now we have something which is approaching something more reasonable at 3.09. If I take a look into the actual data itself, I can now see that I have, context with completed international phone numbers, email addresses, sectors generally sorted. I mean, there's still some anomalies in here that we need to deal with, but generally the data set is in a much better condition than when we started. And it might be that based on that, I now want to do something like give my own voting on this data. I might want to say, well, actually, I'm generally happy with this data. This is giving it a description as well. Cleansed context. And I might actually start to augment the data with information about what the business purpose of this data is, whether it contains any confidential information. Well, there's still email addresses in there, so yes. And generally, as I'm adding additional tagging or discoverability to the data, I'm helping to drive up this trust score. And ultimately, as the data owner of this data, I now might want to share this data set with other people in the organization. So it might be that I want to share with entire groups or individuals within our organization. So let me just share with Onod here, for example, and share that data set. Okay, so that brings us to the end of the demonstration, but hopefully what you've seen here is how the notion of a trust score is able to be a point of measurement around the quality of data at the point of ingestion, how the semantic profiling helps us determine what the data is and how compliant it is with the semantic engines, and helps us determine where to focus our efforts around remediation, and how we can actually look at data as a team sport by allowing data owners and other interested parties to actually engage with that data. So just to summarize, we had our marketing ops user who wanted to improve their marketing effectiveness and look at sensitive data and improve those contacts. What we've seen here is how we can deliver those capabilities around self-service and wrangling of data to the marketing ops persona and help them protect data and provide their own insights how to operationalize that data. From a data engineering perspective, what we've seen here is that we can delegate activities in the overall data lifecycle, specifically around cleansing and protection rules, where the marketing ops person has done much of that work for us. And we've also seen how through things like introspection of the data, pipeline designer, and continuous measurement of data, we're able to demonstrate through the trust score how we can drive improvement and obviously quantifiable benefits in data sets through a fabric platform such as Talend. I want to thank you for your time today, and hopefully that's been a useful session for you. And if there are any questions, then please feel free to ask. Thanks for your time.